This is Kash Patel on the right. He is the current FBI director. And this is him on the show, Stu Peters, on the Stu Peters podcast. Now, if you don't know Stu Peters, he is a Nazi, like full blown Sieg Heiling, Jew hating, Hitler loving Nazi, that kind of person. He also likes to sue people for saying that, but I'm very comfortable in saying it without fear of being sued or anything like that. I'm comfortable saying I can prove that he's, at the very least, very supportive of Hitler's ideas. Anyway, I want to talk about Kash Patel because the other day, in reference to like the Charlie Kirk attack, he said this.
Have the watch, and I'll see you in Valhalla.
I will see you in Valhalla. I'll see you in Valhalla. Why would he say that? Charlie Kirk was a Christian. What does that mean? I happen to know what that means. I wrote this book called Was Hitler an Atheist on World War II. It's on Amazon Audible if you want to read it. Let me give you a little bit of history of not just the Nazis in Germany, but the Nazi movement after it left Germany and was kind of exported to America. The thought leaders, or one of the major thought leaders of the Nazi Party, was named Houston Stewart Chamberlain, and he wrote a book called The Foundations of the 19th Century, released in 1899. And it was incredibly important to Nazi ideology. Houston Stewart Chamberlain was born in the UK, but was like super obsessed with Aryan myths. Aryanism was this concept that originally came out of the Proto-Indo-European or the Indo-Iranian region. Almost the Middle East is like Southwest Asia, kind of that region near India. The word Aryan originally meant noble. It originally translated to noble, but there were epic poems about Aryans, kind of like we have the Odyssey and the Iliad, or the Epic of Gilgamesh. These epic stories about this group called the Aryans, who were strong and smart and beautiful, and they could do anything. And Houston Stewart Chamberlain and others in Germany at the time became obsessed with these epic poems written in the Indo-Iranian region. And Houston Stewart Chamberlain even learned Sanskrit so he could read them in their original language. That's how into them he was. He was one of the thought leaders of the Nazi movement, and Alfred Rosenberg came along after Chamberlain died and continued on in his stead. He continued on to write more stuff on the subject. So baked right into Nazi ideology was this weird obsession with Aryanism, with this, with epic stories about superhumans and stuff. And they were obsessed with Norse mythology, like the god Fenrir and Thor and Odin, or what they called Woden, Woden, was what they called him at the time. They were obsessed with it, like the Nazi Party was. They were 95% Christian in Germany, 3.5% quote unquote believed in God, 1.5% did not believe in God. But it was all over the place. It was widespread how much they loved Norse mythology. And it heavily influenced Nazi ideology generally. Like this idea of toughness and battle and stuff came from their understanding or view of the Vikings, for example. As time went on, the Nazi Party became more and more hostile toward church institutions like the Catholic Church. Not hostile toward Christianity necessarily. Like I said, most were still Christian. The vast majority were all still Christian. But Hitler hated the Catholic institution or even the Protestant institution, in part because it was an institution that he could not directly control, and he persecuted them heavily.
By the way, guys, check out my new shop, owenmorgan.com/shop. I have a bunch of really cool designs on there.
So time goes on, and the Nazi Party is ramping up persecution against the Christian church. And some of the inner circle, like Himmler, for example, were openly into Norse mythology. Like, they call themselves pagans. Pagan in this context really means just a theist that is not Christian, Jewish, or Muslim, basically, from the three main religions. So they call themselves pagans. Himmler was pagan, obsessed with Thor and Woden, and battle, and toughness, and Valhalla. When it was exported from Germany into the United States, the United States was not as religious as Germany was. It just wasn't. It still isn't. Germany was so religious, it's ridiculous. So when it was imported here, people like George Lincoln Rockwell, one of the earliest openly Nazi people in the United States, embraced the kind of pagan / Norse mythology belief system that Himmler had and that other high-ranking Nazis had. That's kind of how neo-Nazi belief systems in the United States shed their Christian beliefs and took on paganism as their primary belief system. William Luther Pierce is the guy that wrote the Turner Diaries, and he was mentored by George Lincoln Rockwell. George Lincoln Rockwell was around in the 50s to the 70s, I think. William Luther Pierce was the 70s to the 90s, if I remember. And then the torch was passed to somebody new. So we have a Nazi movement in the United States that is predominantly anti-Christian. And we also have a Nazi movement now that is predominantly Catholic. The Groypers, Nick Fuentes, those types of people. Anyway, to bring it back to the point that I was reaching here, when we hear Kash Patel say things like this,
Rest now, brother. We have the watch, and I'll see you in Valhalla.
It's clear as day, a shout out, a call out to Nazism. It couldn't possibly be clearer to people who know the history of the Nazi Party and their kind of religious movements and the sway and all of that other stuff. And on top of all of that, you guys remember the Christchurch attack forever ago? The last words of the Christchurch shooter, I believe on Twitter, he posted, "If I don't survive the attack, goodbye, God bless, and I will see you all in Valhalla." This is a super common term or super common expression used in neo-Nazi circles because of its connection to Norse mythology. And it doesn't really surprise me to find that Kash Patel, the FBI director, is a neo-Nazi when he goes on this neo-Nazis podcast all the time.
Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Stu. Always love coming on your show.
Kash Patel, thank you so much for making the time to be here with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Stu. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Stu. Appreciate it. See you soon.
I got to go, Kash. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thanks,
up
Stu.
against a hard break here. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it, Stu.
Kash Patel, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Stu. Appreciate it. You've got a great show.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
He was on there 8 times or something like that. And just to establish Stu Peters' position on Hitler,
they have to say these outlandish things to make up for the fact that if it weren't for this sort of ridiculous, cartoonish death narrative that we've been sold, a lot of people would be looking at the 1930s through 1940s saying, not only does this make a lot of sense, not only does this kind of all add up and history play itself out in the way that we'd expect it to, but there's a lot of similarities to today. And you can't afford to have people start to make those connections. So they come in with this just outlandish narrative where if you put it in a movie, people would say, I didn't like that movie because I just thought it was a little too cartoonish. I didn't think it was realistic. And that's the narrative we've been sold. And to make
talking about the Holocaust, he thinks that the Holocaust is so outlandishly evil that nobody should believe it. That's Stu Peters' guest. Dude's name is John Miller.
I think it was realistic. And that's the narrative we've been sold. And to make Hitler out to be this obscene monster, that's the only way they can essentially remedy this story so that you can say it's clear who the bad guys were and it's clear who the good guys were. Because when you take that part out of the narrative, then it's not really as clear who the evil ones are.
No, it's perfectly clear who the evil ones were in Germany.
When you take out Hitler being a bad guy and killing a ton of people, you don't have a world war. You don't have you don't have a Holocaust. If you take out Hitler killing I don't know, what's the number?
6 million?
6 million Jewish people and whatever.
Give or take.
Yeah. If you take out that entire thing, the history doesn't exist. That's the entire reason. That's the entire thing that was an issue.
I think the issue was that Hitler tried to move beyond Germany. If he had just stayed in Germany and not tried to take France and everywhere else and committed the Holocaust right there, nobody would have done anything. We didn't help because we were trying to save Jews. We didn't give a shit about Jews in the United States back then. We turned a whole boat full of refugees, Jewish refugees, away in the United States, and they went and died in a concentration camp after that. So the reason that the world had a problem with Hitler in the first place was not for his civil rights violations. It was because of his wider ambitions. But to back up what you were saying, sign up for my Patreon. I'd really appreciate that very much. It would mean so much to me. This is like a really precarious moment in history, in U.S. history, and for me personally. So it would mean a lot if you sign up for my Patreon. Check out cultarchive.org. I did a cult test, basically, where you can see if you're in a cult, and you can look at the historical tests of other groups that already went through this. Also, check out my merch. I have a whole bunch of really cool shirts and stuff. Really interesting. I would really appreciate that. So anyway, here's another clip from Stu Peters, if that isn't enough.
It was war. Horrific things happened. Lots of people died. It was World War II. I don't believe that World War II happened as a result of the Holocaust. I don't believe that that was the reason for the war. And
that's correct. I mean, it was because he tried to exit and go into other countries, of course.
I'm asking a lot of questions about that. People don't like when I ask a lot of questions about that.
No, I don't have any problem with you asking questions, but you're not asking questions. You're making statements in the form of a question and pretending that you're just curious about it. I had questions too, and I went in search of the answers, and when I found them, I said, how about that? Isn't that interesting? And moved on with my life. I didn't zero in on this and claim that I know more than historians.
Hitler may have been an evil dictator, a ruthless person that murdered millions of people. I don't know, because of the propaganda that surrounds every war. But for this, wasn't he a hero?
He might have been an evil dictator and a terrible person. We might have hated him, but wasn't he a hero in the end? Wasn't he just so great?
That's psychotic. He's saying, wasn't he a hero for attacking the trans community and the LGBT community broadly?
He said it didn't matter that he was a dictator and an awful person and killed millions, as long as he killed transgenders.
Yep.
No, because of the propaganda that surrounds every war. But for this, wasn't he a hero? Wasn't Hitler doing the right thing when he ordered these books to be burned and these places to be stormed by force?
That's what I'm saying. Like, he's a Nazi, right? I'm comfortable saying he's a Nazi. He literally sued somebody, Newsweek maybe, for saying Stu Peters said that Hitler was a hero. According to him, that's what they said. Isn't that what he said? Anyway, the point is, Kash Patel knows Stu Peters, has been on his podcast like 8 different times, hangs out with him. They talk. Stu Peters is a Nazi. Kash Patel, the FBI director, talks about Valhalla, of all things. It's clear as day that Kash Patel is a Nazi, right? I'm comfortable saying that. Anyway, tell me what you think about it in the comments.